problems up on the board or something in number 1 or number 2, or put them on a test, and I'd go 1, 2, 5, 6, 7. You know, they'd always cue me. I can't count. Yeah. I'd get sidetracked on something else and then come back to it and make a mess. It's expanded quite a bit over the years, hasn't it? That's a really nice gift.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Friday edition of the December State Board of Education. It's an emptier room than it was yesterday morning. We have Michael Lowry from ADEQ is going to give us our reminders for the day.
Good morning. Welcome, y'all. Thank you for being here. Quick safety briefing. Y'all know where the restrooms are in the center area, the front lobby. Use the exit if in an event of emergency. Use the exit door here. Your leaders will be Kevin and Gail. And if y'all need anything, we're here to serve. Y'all got my number, and glad to have y'all. Thank y'all. Thank you.
It is great.
Thanks for hosting. All right. We do have Ms. Chambers on the line, so we really appreciate her. We know how hard it is to do a long meeting on the phone, and so we really appreciate her doing that, and we hope that Ms. Dean will join as well, but she's not yet on the line. Obviously we have a series of reports today, and we start out with the Computer Science Initiative report, and you do have some materials at your microphones on the Computer Science report. And I'll turn it over to Anthony Owen.
Good morning, Dr. Barth, Board. Anthony Owen, State Director of Computer Science Education. Obviously, as part of the agenda packet, y'all had my written notes, but there was a lot of information that we were not prepared to release at that time because of Computer Science Education Week last week, which was a wonderful week, and I want to take just a quick moment to say thank you to all the staff at ADE that had a huge part in that, but in particular the communications department. There was a lot of information that went out last week and a lot of coordination on those efforts between our offices communications, and the governor's office and their communications team, and our AD communications team just did a wonderful job with that. A couple quick things. I'm not going to go too in depth in the enrollment data. I'll answer any specific questions that y'all have, but I will share some data before y'all's next board meeting. That way, if y'all want to tear down into that and then ask specific questions, I will just give you a couple high points of notice. When this initiative started, prior to the year the initiative started, we had about 1,100 students that were enrolled in a high-quality computer science course. The first year, we grew to 4,000 roughly. Last year, we were at 5,500 individual students taking a computer science course, and this year we're happy to announce we continue to see a growth. We had a 12% growth over last year, with about 6,200 students across the state taking a computer science course in our high schools. And so that is a huge win for us. We're getting very close to those numbers that we need for that 20% mark of graduating with 1 credit in computer science. We do have some ways, some areas of improvement that we can, or some areas that we can improve on. And here in a moment, I'm going to call up a great partner that is helping us figure out ways to address underserved populations and gender gap issues within computer science courses. But moving through the information, the addendum packet that y'all were provided yesterday is a series of CS Education Week announcements. Y'all probably have not had time to look over those. I am willing to go through those or answer any specific questions. Beyond that, I don't really have anything extra to share until we get into bringing up Ms. Gorman, but I'll take any questions that y'all have over the packet or any other information that was presented.
Any questions?
Are most of the students, you may not have this data, but if you have the data, are most of the students that are taking it in place of a math or science, or in addition to their math and science requirements?
So that data would not be the only data that we could look at is last year's graduating seniors, which really would have only been available for 1 to 2 years of the program. So I can provide that data. I don't know what I'll be glad to gather and provide that data. Just be aware that we really can't measure whether a student's replacing or changing their graduation requirements under math or science until they actually graduate.
Okay, and because I know in some of the high schools, the students or their parents still haven't been told this is an option, you can do it this way, or you can do it this way, and I think many of those students would be interested if the counselor, superintendent, principal, somebody informed them and their parents. So, but I know there's only so much you can do.
Well, my office has a lot of work left to do with communications and getting the message out. I go back to it's all about the local teachers and superintendents also. We need their support in this initiative, and a lot of our superintendents across the state and principals and teachers and counselors are doing a wonderful job communicating that information. There are a few, though, that we would like for them to do better. I'll say it that way. Thank you.
I just want to highlight Ms. Zook's first question. This was a worry of mine when we took this path, is the replacement possibility in that our science and our math
curriculum might get undermined a bit because I think we're making great strides in science education as well. Right at the time computer science came on, and I was afraid that the students might lose that. So I think once next year's graduation data becomes available, I think it would be really helpful to just know how this is fitting into the rest of the curriculum, and I think that and the rest of student learning. So that would be helpful. I think the other thing I have a question on, and I know we're going to hear some about young women in computer science in just a minute, but in terms of students of color and their access to computer science education, do we have any special initiatives there? Because I know that especially on the AP side, really incredibly low numbers still in that regard.
So we one, we think that our K-8 component to the computer science is a long-term solution to this. I will say that while we do still have some room to grow in Arkansas, we are doing exceptionally better than most of the rest of the nation in regards to a equivalent percentage of our underserved populations in terms of race and ethnicity taking computer science courses. We're at about 39% of our students that are taking computer science, a little over 39% actually, are children of minorities. So that is very close to our state overall population. But the problem that we have as a state is that we're at 20% females taking computer, 26% of the students that are taking the computer science courses are females. That's the gap that our office is focusing on, because we think also that if we can close that gender gap, that means that we're making it accessible and approachable by everyone, which will close those very small discrepancies in the racial issue or discrepancies within the enrollment.
We do have some pretty big
Discrepancies when it comes to the passage of AP tests, et cetera, right? We do have some pretty major race and ethnicity gaps when we get to that level, right?
Yeah. Well, so we have went from, for example, I think in 2014-15, we had fewer than 5 females of color taking the APCSA exam across our state. Now, that's better in some states because some states have 0, still to this day. But we have grown that number. We still have a lot of growth to go, to move on that. But we are doing things like our incentive program, stipend incentive program to students, that if they make a qualifying score, 3, 4, or 5, we're providing them incentive. We also have provided a grant to Arkansas Tech University that is expanding access specifically for the Delta area, which is encompassing a lot of schools, and that's CSA access. That's encompassing a lot of schools with a high minority population, the schools that we targeted under that. But yes, sir, we do have a lot of room to grow in that.
You started talking about this just a little bit, but I would like to know a little bit more about the K-8, how the progress is going there, because you know as well as I do, if we can get them excited while they're young, that will let the high school part take care of itself. And so are you getting buy-in there? How is that progressing?
So it's like almost any other educational initiative. We have schools that are doing wonderful strides and doing everything right, or doing things right. I won't say everything right, but doing things right and really going after that with the focus and the passion that we want to see. We have other schools that are not, but that's where we have different programs that are coming online to try to excite. One of the announcements that was made last week was our K-8 librarian rollout. We see in my office a unique place that our library media specialists have across the state to help teachers understand how to embed this content area. Also, our library media specialists interact with every student within their school on a weekly basis. So we do see that as a crucial part, and that's part of the reason we focused that announcement to our library media specialists. In addition, I think that our K-8 lead teacher program, I've received probably 60, 70 emails regarding that lead teacher program across the state, where we're going to provide training to those K-8 teachers that are interested in going back and helping their other teachers understand and driving that passion, and then providing professional development to those other teachers in their school. And so we have these programs in place that we're building out that, though we're in the first year of implementation of the K-8 standards, we have things in place that we think that are going to build out and grow that program. In addition, we have some other things coming down the pipeline that I think is going to grow the excitement around the K-8 arena. We're not ready to announce that yet, but I think it's going to drive a huge excitement in a competitive spirit of those K-8 students. But I hope to be able to bring that information to you next board meeting.
Appreciate all the efforts you're doing to be inclusive. And one thing, when I was in Silicon Valley, and this just food for thought, just to keep this in mind, and I've been in San Jose, our college had a minority engineering program, and the summer program was very intensive. But what they would do, even in the summer months, because sometimes minorities are not excited about, in some, the population we're trying to reach, talking about the Delta and Oakland, and I'm just looking at the urban communities I was dealing with. They were not excited about trying to learn that content. So what they found really excited them is to start with the end in mind. So what they did, they took these students to see how the PlayStation and the Xbox and all of the things that they like to do with technology, and then before they introduced them to that curriculum, they saw this is what you're going to do, and that excited them to get involved in that process. So I think, you stretch the mind. Once the brain is stretched, it never regains its original dimension. I think you take those kids in those type of environments and situations, and you let them see, this is what you're going to learn to do. Then they don't focus on how boring the process is or how it's perceived to be, and it allows them to say, oh, you mean I'm getting ready to do, if they're going to Flextronics, you mean I'm getting ready to help put together this Xbox? Which is a math and science content to be able to do that. And I just think sometimes you have to trick them, to get them engaged. And so just, whatever that is for you, when I realized, because I was working very closely with that, he was a big supporter of the program I was working with, and so he let me see that. And so the kids were just so excited about once they saw that, then the process didn't bore them. They knew where they were going, and they kept focused on that. So that's just food for thought.
Well, and thank you. And our standards do account for that in a way. But I will say that as we move this initiative forward, exactly what you're saying is a crucial component of us continuing to build those industry and partner relationships, because not only does it have to be those interesting technologies at those lower grade levels to get them interested, but it has to be those local technology industries that have jobs for those high school students when they leave, that say, here's something that you can be doing, and we can pay you $70,000 out of high school if you'll come out with these skills. And so, yes, we think developing those industry partnerships and showing students an end to the means, so to speak, is crucial also. Thank you, sir. Okay.
When you and I were in Mountain Home, I think one of the things that was especially impressive to me, not only that they were doing it, but they had their ALE students, their special ed students, their girls, their boys, their minorities, their regular class students, AP and all that, because we didn't have it at the time, all working in the same classroom with a teacher sort of almost doing like a flipped classroom and a project based. So everyone was not only learning what they needed to know next, but they were also helping the others, which they then saw that translated through the whole school as far as less bullying. I mean, so it was just sort of a, let's do this, and gosh, we didn't know we might get this out of it. And so, we were fortunate enough to both be able to see that at the same time. So there's a lot of really good things going on, and discovering some benefits we didn't even think about. Or you probably did, but I didn't.
Well, and that's a school that is buying into that every student's not going to be a computer scientist or a programmer, but every student can benefit from some sort of an appropriate computer science education. And that's what I need all administrators and all schools across the state to understand. We're not asking every student to be a programmer, but the problem-solving skills and analytical thought processes, as I tell, and back to Dr. Barth's earlier statement about the math, I was a math teacher. I was a math specialist. I'm a math major. I value math greatly. But, I taught many students how to calculate the area under a parabolic curve using Riemann sums. How many of us in the room were taught that as a student in pre-calculus or calculus, but how many of us use it in our jobs in everyday life? If you're an engineer, you can raise your hand. But outside that, very few people do, unless they're just teaching it to other people. But why do we teach those higher level concepts? Because it's a new concept that they can develop those problem-solving skills, those analytical thinking skills. Well, that's what computer science does. It's a new problem set for them to develop those skills under.
And one of the students was autistic, and they chose him because he's particularly good at some of the things to be the one who competed with the governor on a skill. And then, of course, he beat the governor. And his mentor looked over to him and said, "You're not supposed to beat the governor." And the little boy was a little confused, and he said, "It's a joke." So getting out and getting those classrooms is what it's all about.
If there are no further questions, I have a special guest I would like, with Dr. Barth and the board's permission, to invite up. Annabeth Gorman, if you'll join me, is the executive director of the Women's Foundation of Arkansas. Her office, Annabeth is one of those people that I can call up. She still answers the phone when I call, and she usually, I either usually say I have a crazy idea, or she says, "What's your crazy idea now?" But a lot of them we work together on, and I'm going to let her share a little bit of a recent example of some phone calls that started between Gail Morris and myself and Annabeth, and it really came out to a great product and something that I think our state can be proud of and hopefully can be replicated nationally. We're still in talks with a partner about that, but I'll let her share more. Thank you, Annabeth.
Good morning. My name is Annabeth Gorman. I'm the Executive Director of the Women's Foundation of Arkansas. And yes, we're a proud partner of the Department of Education. The Women's Foundation of Arkansas, we exist to promote women in the Arkansas economy. And one of our strategies for almost 20 years has been the Girls of Promise initiative, where we promote STEM education and career pathways for girls across Arkansas. To date, we've served over 6,000 girls. And we placed a bet on that years ago that the future of the jobs would be the STEM related areas, and we wanted girls who become women to have better paying jobs to take care of themselves and their families. So prior to STEM becoming, forgive me, sexy and everybody talking about it, we've been in this business for a long time as an early program partner in this niche area. In the last year and a half, again, I've had the privilege of working with Anthony in some other projects. This April actually was invited as a part of a state delegation to go to Massachusetts, and we were on the campus of Google Cambridge as a state delegation talking about what Arkansas is doing to promote computer science. And I'm looking around the room and I'm like, why am I the girl at this party? And I realize it's because I represent equity. I represent a strategy that our state and my organization, that we're promoting equity in this area. And I tell you what, I was one of the only equity partners at this conference. Again, Arkansas really is leading the nation when we're even thinking about these things. And I know that the data is showing that we have a lot of work to do, but it's incredible that our state is having that conversation and is reaching out to agencies like mine to create those strategies. And so after we left that conference in April, again, Anthony and his big ideas started talking to me about, what would it look like if we created, a public service announcement? So we brought in AT&T Arkansas, one of our funders, and we talked about inviting students, 6th through 12th grade, girl and boy students, to pitch us their ideas on how to promote girl and minority students. Because in what we're doing, yes, we want to see more girls engaged, but gender and racial equity is what we want to accomplish. And when we can do that, then we'll be successful as a state. So we invited teams of students. We kicked off our announcement on August 24th with the governor in Beebe, Arkansas. And before we did our big announcement, we walked into a computer science class. There was one girl in that class. And in Beebe, Arkansas, there might have been one student of color. We have got to create a culture in our state that values STEM education. And the way to do that is exciting partnerships and ideas. So we had teams from across the state come to us with their ideas. And these were students of girls and boys. And it was really incredible to see what they think would motivate other students. So we're really incredibly proud. We had 2 7th grade students from Pinnacle Valley Middle School submitted the winning pitch. And they were from an East Initiative class as well, so I wanted to mention that. And then AETN came in and they produced their pitch. And tonight, it's premiering in the majority of movie theaters across Arkansas on Star Wars weekend. So we know that we're going to have people seeing our public service announcement. And again, this was a project that I'm like, oh, okay, we can do this, but what we saw from our students was incredible. And every time we do something new, we see that our students are hungry for it, but we're still seeing that we've got to get our schools behind this culture. You know, we view computer science as a language that's going to be necessary to help navigate the STEM economy. So yes, you're going to need everything else, but this is going to be a component that's going to ensure your success. And we want to see our students in Arkansas become leaders in the STEM economy. We want to see that for Arkansas. So I'm incredibly proud of what we've accomplished. I'm excited about future opportunities, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have. I think we're going to get to see it, too.
Thank you. That was awesome. And so we have teed up the PSA. Gail, do you have it ready to go?
It's hard to be a girl. People never think you can do as much as men. And the moment they lay eyes on you, they see...
There we go.
It's hard to be a girl. People never think you can do as much as men. And the moment they lay eyes on you, they see dumb, dependent, easily hurt, passive. But STEM made me see different.
People think I can be limited until I create something limitless, until I prove them wrong. You can waste your time living in the lines, or you can cross them.
We choose to cross them. We make our own ways. We choose to set our own path.
Because of computer science is stud strut, not hide.
So just a little 30-second PSA, and that will start in theaters tonight across the state, and I think run for 2 weeks, and that was part of, AD's computer science funding, but the bulk of it came from AT&T, and we want to thank them. And we just want to thank Annabeth and the Women's Foundation for their continued support. Thank y'all.
Thank y'all. Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right. Next up we have, last month, of course, we got the initial educational co-op report, and we all got the sense of what these reports are now going to look like, and we have 2 more today, and so I'll turn it over to Dr. Fernandez.
Good morning, Mike Hernandez, Office of Coordinated Support and Service. You do have the next 2 co-op evaluation reports in front of you, part of your board packet. The only clarification I do want to make is in Northeast there was a statement about Junior Firemen's Academy, that was the only one in the state. That's the only one that a co-op runs in the state. There's actually 2 others, and so we got that clarification if you noticed that in any of the notes. But last time we talked about the details of what the report's comprised of and how that was structured. And so today with both Northeast Co-op and Dawson, you have those reports, and I'm available to answer any questions you may have on those reports.
So,
any questions on either the Northeast report or the Dawson report? Ms. Rice, anything? Ms. Hook, anything? Look very clear to me. Any questions over here? All right. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hernandez.
All right, thank you.
We were easier. This was easier than yesterday, right? All right. This will not be as easy, thanks to Ms. Zook. The next up are the Succeed Scholarship report, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Salas Ford.
Good morning. Apologize for the rough voice. It's that time of year. Courtney Salas Ford for the department, and I've also got Miss Lisa Tyler now, no longer Miss Haley, due to recent marriage. So congratulations, Lisa.
Thank you.
With me
still says Haley, but
from the special ed unit, available to answer any questions that the board may have. We have submitted to you a report on the Succeed Scholarship Program, which is a program that was started during the 2015 legislative session to award scholarships to students with an IEP to attend the private school of their choice. During the 2017 legislative session, 3 acts were passed that expanded upon this program, and so in your report, we have those 3 acts listed as well as the changes that were imposed by those acts. The report includes the numbers of students that are participating, broken down by certain categories that were requested. But as of the 2017-2018 school year, we do have 185 students receiving scholarships. And I'll go ahead and open it up to questions. I have additional information I can add, in addition to the report, but to make sure we cover everything, I'll just open it up for questions.
Sure. Over here. Ms. Cochran, anything? Ms. Newton? Okay. Okay, I'll turn.
I think there were some things that I wanted to point out because I know the board doesn't have the time to look in detail about everything, but on the one point where it says the number of students that required a superintendent waiver for eligibility was 85. The only reason you need a superintendent waiver is because that student was not in your district last year. So these are students likely who were already in these schools and not students that were receiving service by the traditional or charter school. Also, I wanted to be sure that, and I've talked with Ms. Salas Ford about this too, if a child is in foster care and also has an IEP, that foster parent or group home cannot place them in and give up their civil right. So that was something, that we'll have to work out in-house because a foster parent is, although they have them temporarily, they are not, the rights of the parent by the court have not been severed, and so therefore the parent is the only one who has the right to do that. So, it's just a matter of bookkeeping and checking and all of that. The questions that I had are do all of these schools on this list, do they have a licensed special ed teacher on staff? And if not, who are they contracting with and who is mentoring those special ed teachers? Because the vast majority of these schools are church schools and not schools that specialize in serving students with handicaps. So that was my first question. I mailed these questions to her ahead of time.
And the ADE rules do require that each private school either employ or contract with a special ed licensed teacher. So we don't have specifically the numbers of which employ and which contract because they just answer the question of do they employ or do they contract and submit a copy of the teacher's license. Even if, they employ a teacher, they only have to, by rule, employ one teacher. It doesn't have to be one per student, one per grade. And so we don't track the qualifications of those teachers because, again, that's not something that they are required to provide by statute.
Okay. And what about the additional service like therapies, OT, PT, speech, those kinds of things? Because I noticed a large portion of these have an IEP for speech, which means they're not, they may everything from having something like a mild lisp on up. So it's the original law was written that they needed to have a severe disability, but it got defined as an IEP. Well, you can have an IEP for a lisp, and that's not a severe disability. You may feel like it if you're 6, that, and your friends make fun of you, but it's not on the severe scale. So are they required to provide the therapists that are needed?
They are not. And so what you see on this list are the categories that these students were eligible for, but not necessarily the services or specific particular services they were receiving. So we wouldn't know if they were receiving language therapy for multiple minutes or hours per week, or if it were just a mild articulation delay, if they were eligible under speech language.
So the school is required to either have on staff or contract for a teacher, but it doesn't, the law doesn't speak to the support therapies.
Correct.
And we do require them to notify us what services they are offering, and that's posted on the department's website. But if they were to say none, again, there's not a requirement that they provide it, there's just a requirement that they notify us so that that information is out there for parents as they're looking at schools and making that determination.
So can I just ask a clarifying question? No, well, just we're referencing this section on the IDEA disability.
Does this, so if a student has multiple categorizations, are there students on this list who have categorization, disability categorizations that fall in different of these categories?
So under IDEA, a student could have multiple disabilities, but they will only have one qualifying category. And so in order to get an IEP, they have to qualify under one of the 13 categories. Each category has different criteria, but you could have a student that had a speech disability, a vision disability, a mental disability, and whichever qualifications they met, that would be the identifying category. So they're only going to have one disability category, even though they might have multiple disabilities.
I just wanted to be clear, these were distinct students rather than students who were...
report, those are distinct students.
Great. Thanks. Ms. Hook?
Okay, and is there anything in the law that requires the district or the receiving private school to be sure that the parents understand that they are giving up their child's civil rights?
So the law does require the parents to sign a waiver form, and that waiver is part of the application for the Succeed Scholarship Program. It is in very detail notifies the parent that they are giving up their right to a free appropriate public education from the resident school district, from the state, and that the only services they are eligible for is whatever the district decides to provide under its private school proportionate share obligation.
Right. And I don't think I wrote this one down, but you will know this, is the category where they show the early childhood, is that 3 and 4 year olds?
So those categories are what the child was eligible for, and we found that information by looking in our database because some of these students might not have had an IEP for several years because the requirement when the superintendent waives, then we have to look to see if they were eligible. Sometimes they had an IEP in preschool and went right into a private school after that. So originally they were eligible for early childhood special education, which is kind of a global category, and it means they had some pretty severe deficits in social or cognitive or self-help skills, that kind of thing. So it's not a specific disability because at 3 and 4, you know, it's really hard to get an accurate IQ score and make those eligibility determinations. So they were found eligible when they were 3, 4, or 5, but not yet kindergarten age.
So we, as ADE, the K-12 ADE, we are not paying any for any child who's 3 or 4 years old. That's just when they were
exactly early. No, these students, many of them are 10, 11 years old or older, but when they were found eligible and had an IEP that we could accept for application into the scholarship, it was in early childhood.
So if a child is in a program and no longer receiving special ed service, do they come back to the public school, or once you qualify, you continue to be qualified?
Are you asking about under Succeed? So if a child was found no longer eligible for special education, they would not qualify for Succeed. But if they were found eligible, say in preschool, and then they went into a private school, and they were never found ineligible, they would be eligible for Succeed. We have added to our application, because it was a little bit difficult to sort this out, we did some digging in our database to kind of find this information. So we have added into the application, and it says the parents have to tell us the last time they were enrolled in public school, so that if they would submit an IEP, we could figure out if that's the most recent IEP and make sure that at some point they weren't found ineligible, so that we can be more accurate. Because we want every child and family who's eligible for this scholarship under the law and wants to access it to be able to do so. And we want to make sure that they fit the criteria and eligibility.
For those who may not know, you have to have a meeting with parents every year and write and develop new goals, which is your individual education plan. So what I'm hearing is a child may have been identified for some type of service when they were 4. They've been going to this school. The IEP may not still be in effect, or they may not still need service. The superintendent gave a waiver to the parent because they weren't in his school or her school last year, but they may or may not be getting or even needing any direct special ed service from a teacher or occupational or physical or speech therapist. Is that correct?
We would have no way of knowing whether or not they still needed services or not, and so all we can do is follow the law, which says they had an IEP, and it doesn't say the year immediately before they entered school. So that's why we added that section in the application, though, so that we could make for sure that the last time they were in school that they had an active IEP.
So, for my fellow board members, you see what my level of concern is, because you have given up a child's civil rights, the parents have, and they may or may not be getting the service they need as far as speech, OT, PT. They may or may not be taught by an in-house special ed teacher, and they may or may not be in a school that really fully understands the social and all the other things that go in that are needed, rather than, some people used to think that a special ed teacher just talked louder and slower, and, that's with special ed. Well, that's not. And if they're in an environment where they are not in a school that specializes in this, we, as the state, have no ability, based on this law, to look after these children. It's unfortunate. It is the law. They're doing the best they can with the law. But it's like they said, even if they say, no, we're not doing this or this, we're informed, but we have no teeth about what we can do. So I have no doubt that the legislators who voted for this heard special ed. Goodness, we want them to have what they have. But there are very few schools, private schools in the state of Arkansas, that specialize in working with kids that have handicaps. That's because, to an extent, a lot of the districts have done a good job with that, and with the help of the special ed section. But, obviously, I think this is unfortunate, but there's nothing I can do about it except ask these ladies to be here and be available and answer these questions. Was there another question that I had that?
Can I actually follow up on
this waiver is a right to pre-appropriate public education. So it's obviously a waiver of the right
for the entrance into the scholarship program. If the family decides it's time to go back to traditional public education or charter, does that right come back, and at what point does that right come back?
Yes, absolutely. The minute that child decides to re-enroll in a public school or traditional public school or charter school, their rights are reinstated. The receiving district could either implement the previous IEP if they feel like it's still appropriate, or they can go ahead and reevaluate that student and determine what is now appropriate given the student's current needs and areas of deficit. But yes, they would immediately start receiving services. And if I just might add to Mrs. Oak's comments, yes, the law prohibits us from, requiring certain things of these private schools as part of this program, but that's the same as for any student whose parent chose to send them to private school. Even for those students who are not receiving a scholarship, once they choose to leave a public school and go to private school, the department has no oversight over the special ed teachers or services or any other requirements that are provided at that private school. The waiver is just for our benefit in making sure that these parents understand that, but every parent who chooses to go to private school is giving up that right.
Oh,
I do want to say, I do fully agree with Ms. Zook, is that, I know that this was, it was obviously an attempt for the introduction of a voucher program in the state, and it was an attempt to do it in a small way, but it was, I feel, a very vulnerable student population became the focus of this program, and I think that was, I personally think that was problematic, because as Ms. Salas-Ford says, once a private school enters the scene, many things go away, including achievement scores. Right? We don't know the performance of these students because they don't have to take assessments and other things because they're in private institutions. And so, I do think it's worrisome, but it's the law. And as I said yesterday, there are a lot of laws that the legislature passes that I don't love, but they're the laws, and we have to follow them.
And the Succeed Scholarship Law does actually require the private school to give each of these students an assessment, but we don't receive the scores or any of that information.
And so it's difficult to do any research on whether
these programs really have had the kind of success that is portrayed in the name of the act in some way. Right. Okay.
Thank you all very much for digging into this and being
other
patient with my questions.
Yeah. Other questions, comments? Again, we're not beating up on y'all. We appreciate all of your hard work to implement this really challenging piece of legislation. So thank you all.
And being in year 2, if I just might add, we, as changes are made to the program, we internally are making adjustments and changes and tracking more data to try to, of course, administer the program as efficiently and in accordance with law as we can. So we will continue to collect this data and provide it to any legislators or board members that are interested going forward.
Right.
Mr. Chair, obviously, as you can imagine, the folks who advocate for this program but have been in contact with me knowing that this was going to be on a topic for your discussion today, but they are willing to come here and to a board meeting in the future and talk about results, talk about some of these issues, and I don't know what data they have. I'm not sure if it's data or anecdotal, but they are interested in telling about some of the benefits that families have seen. So I'm all for that. Told Ms. Lee that I would make that offer to y'all on her behalf today so that y'all would know that they're willing to come in and talk about it sometime in the future.
So it wasn't the legislators themselves, but it was the lobbyists.
No, I haven't had any contact from the legislators since we were trying to make sure we were. Well, Representative House certainly was, he came before, but I think the last contact we had with legislators was over the qualification language pertaining to ISP versus IEP.
Representative Lowry had sponsored the bill that allowed the waiver from the superintendent, and his intent may have been to also allow those students to not have a current IEP. However, that language was not incorporated into the law. So yes, there was some confusion over whether a student who did not have an IEP, had never had an IEP, could be eligible for the program.
I guess, my concern, I've been a special ed for a very long time, and I also was a CASA worker, which takes care of, like, the foster children. And I don't know if it was just an oversight, but my initial reaction is people feel emotional more than intellectual about kids in special ed and foster children. And it seemed, from my point of view, not questioning their motives, but from my point of view, it seemed that they were saying, we can get this program started in Arkansas by taking and making it intended for the kids that you're going to feel emotional about rather than intellectually making a decision. So as an advocate for both of these groups, I feel that it would not be prudent of me to have this position and not speak out and express my frustrations and concerns about the most vulnerable of our population. And that is all.
If y'all would like for us to follow up with them, let us know about scheduling something in the future. No? Okay.
All right. Thank you all very much, and thank you, Ms. Sook, and Commissioner. All right, next up, we have the annual report from the Arkansas Advisory Council for the Education of Gifted and Talented Children, and I see Ms. Stein and Ms. Smith. She left you behind.
Yes, she did. She said, she sent me up here alone. I'm Mary Catherine Stein from the Office of Gifted and Talented, and you should have a copy of the Arkansas Advisory Council for the Education of Gifted Children. Our office, by law, serves as secretary for this group, and they do an annual report, which is presented to you, and the governor, various other entities receive copies. It's a nice historical document about gifted education in our state. If you go back to the beginning of services for gifted students in 1983. And I'm here to answer any questions that you might have about the information in the report.
Great. Thank you for the written report.
Any questions or comments? Ms. Cochran, anything? Anything? Okay. Ms. Newton, anything? Mr. Williamson? What?
I think we may have a technology delay for a second, so we could pause for a second.
Let's be sure everybody has it in front of them.
No problem.
Ms. Wright, did you have anything in the meantime? Okay. All right. Ms. Hook, did you have any? I think they've all, they're, yeah.
Oh, no problem. Thank you, then. Anything else?
Yeah, I think I will I'd like your take on the AP
score issue and, you know, what we're doing in terms of reaching student populations that have historically not been reached by AP. And I think we've seen the maps, and we know certain parts of the state where AP participation is low, and then we also know, of course, racial and ethnic populations with which AP participation is low. And I'd appreciate kind of your take, having been in this work for a long time, about what can we do as a state to really take that step.
Well, when I attend meetings with the College Board, they talk about the Arkansas model. They look at what we have in terms of our rules and legislation regarding advanced placement as something other states should be emulating. Because our state pays for the exams for all students, we are opening up AP to any student who is willing to accept that challenge. It's not a challenge that every student will want to accept, but it's very appropriate for students who intend to go to college, and so it's there. We have some schools that offer the 4 required advanced placement courses, and they may not have any students who enroll in those courses, and I think that's very sad. I think that our schools need to be more proactive in encouraging students who are capable, because in any school in this state, there's a population of students who could be successful in advanced placement courses with a little more, urging. So, and
yeah, when the College Board was here, we had a report about maybe 4 months ago, and showed some maps. I mean, they're clearly just swaths of the state where district leadership seems to not be investing that energy in being proactive. And I guess the question is because we know there are students who can succeed on AP exams, a variety of AP exams in every corner of this state, and even if it is free, that doesn't mean that the district leadership will kind of be in that with a focus on being sure that the most talented students do take advantage of those opportunities. I've been grappling with it the last few months after seeing those maps, and I'm really curious what thoughts y'all have on what we can do. I mean, obviously the laws are great. I mean, Arkansas. I mean, at the last NASB meeting, the head of the College Board actually was citing the Arkansas model as this is the way to do it. But we still know that we've got lots of parts of this state, no matter how good the laws are here, where we're not doing all we can for the most talented students.
Make a comment to that, Stacy Smith. Within the new ESSA plan, within that fifth indicator part, incentivizing school districts to give points for students who do take AP classes. And again, it's about having that conversation, opening up to giving access to more kids. And then on top of that, we need to really start pushing about who's making their qualifying scores and looking at our data and our research and providing good support in that area. But that's part of our ESSA plan, is that equity piece and making sure the state does a good job right now providing for all, but we're making sure all kids are in those courses. And so incentivizing districts to make those choices.
I wonder if some of it is because some of those districts can't employ teachers who can teach the AP class. Did you have some of that?
That used to be more of an issue than it is now, but with digital providers, I mean, if a student wants to take a class, they really aren't handicapped by where they live anymore. And, we hope that schools are cooperative when a student decides they want to take a class where there isn't a teacher. And I've just seen in the last, 5 or 6 years, great growth in the availability. So no matter where you live, you ought to be able to take an AP course. Even if it's digitally, it's available to you, which was not always the case.
I know a few of the districts in my congressional district, they really push the concurrent credit more than they do the other, some of which is because maybe the teacher that can teach concurrent credit isn't qualified to teach AP, but if you visit those classes, many times it's very much like an AP class. It's just called something different. So I just wondered if it was because they couldn't get the teachers, but that's good to know that it's not.
I don't think that's the issue anymore. The major difference, concurrent has its place, but you don't have that national test to see how your students did compared to everyone in the country. That fact that it's national means no matter where you take that test in our state, your grade compares to anybody else, no matter where they live in the United States. That's a huge thing, and it justifies the work the teachers in the classroom are doing and the work the students are doing to prepare for those exams. So, anything else?
Just want to add to the work that we're doing also involves. I mentioned this before. We had applied for I think it's called Lead Hire grant from the Jack Kent Cook Foundation. We were not successful, but we continued to try to do some of the work that would have been encapsulated under that grant. And the goal for that grant is to really get to the districts having that conversation. I think we do have a great model. I think we have great partners with Ames. I don't think it's enough. We're seeing the strides, and I'm glad the College Board recognizes what we're doing. But it is difficult to get some of those conversations at the district level. So I think when you look at some of that work that we're doing in Jonesboro, in Bentonville, and there's one more that I can't remember right now, Gina, one more school. But, okay, so we had another one, and I think they dropped out. We have to get more high schools looking at how do we identify the students with potential, rather than just leaving it up to the student to self-select. We need folks who are recruiting, recruiting intel. We need teachers and counselors and principals who know and see potential in some of these kids that they don't recognize. And I think that's some of the work that we're doing through this effort in Jonesboro and Bentonville, especially Jonesboro. I've talked to the superintendent there, and she's very pleased with the change in that dynamic of, I don't know that we're seeing great numbers yet, but if they keep the conversation going internally, they're going to see more of those underserved students coming into these higher level, higher rigor classes. So that's something that we are very interested in doing, and as Stacy mentioned, incorporating that into the student quality or school quality student success indicator, I think is going to be a significant boost to changing those conversations.
If I may add, the last 2 years, and we all are also going to do it this year, we have sent out AP potential letters to students who took the PSAT as sophomores to push them. And the letter, there's an algorithm that says you have a chance of being very successful if you take this course and this course, and it's limited to the courses available at their schools. And that, I think, is another way to touch students. That AP potential tool is available to all high schools, but we were worried in our state that depending on schools where you have resources stretched far, they may not get around to doing that AP potential letter. So we're one of the only places I know of that sends it out at the state level. So if a student's taking that PSAT and they've demonstrated that they could be successful in AP, they're getting a letter that goes to their family that says you ought to sign up for these courses. And hopefully with the student success plans, that will help to have more oversight to be sure these students do take the challenging courses who need to be there. So, anything else you want to ask?
Some often the students who go on to take AP courses were identified early as being gifted and talented. But we know that minority students often need alternative measures of identification for gifted and talented. The traditional methods don't always identify them accurately. Are there any initiatives here in Arkansas to implement those alternative methods to identify minority students?
Absolutely. We're doing the thing that research says is best to try to identify students who match the demographics of your school population, and that is our program of whole group enrichment. Every kindergarten student through whatever grade level before the district decides to do formal identification, those students receive 30-minute lessons weekly, provided in most cases by a licensed GT person. And really what they're for is long-term identification, observational data collected on children over 2 or 3 years at a minimum. And research says that is the very best way to identify minority and low-income students for gifted and talented students services. So we really have been pushing that in our state. So thank you for the question. Yes, we are on the forefront there.
Thank you, Ms. Stein, for all your work over so many years on gifted and talented education.
Thanks.
As well.
If I may take this opportunity to add that we just recently were notified for 6 schools that were that for this year are on the annual AP honor roll. This is a list that the College Board recognizes to be included on the AP honor roll. A district had to increase the number of students participating in AP while also increasing or maintaining the percentage of students earning AP exam scores of 3 or higher over the last 3 years. Reaching these goals shows that these districts are successfully identifying motivated, academically prepared students who are ready for AP. And this year, those districts are the Bentonville Public Schools, Harmony Grove, Benton Harmony Grove School District, the Marion School District, Mountain View School District, Paris School District, and also the Diocese of Little Rock was also included in that recognition. So good work by these systems, and hopefully that list will grow as we continue this work.
Excellent. All right, next up, Ms. Cochran, your report.
Good morning. This month, I'd like to talk to you about whole child learning because, as you know, my platform, my mission as the 2017 Arkansas Teacher of the Year is to engage and empower every child. And whole child learning is a critical piece of that mission. Ms. Zook shared a beautiful quote from Horace Mann with me before the meeting started today. The teacher who is attempting to teach without inspiring is hammering on cold iron. And I would take that even further and say that the teacher who is not teaching to the whole child is doing the same thing. Simply put, learning doesn't occur in a vacuum. According to ASCD, the whole child approach is an effort to transition from a focus on narrowly defined academic achievement to one that promotes the long-term development and success of all children. So, to learn more about whole child learning, I visited Butterfield Trail Elementary School in Van Buren, where I teach, and it is also where my oldest child goes to school. This school won in 2017 the ASCD Whole Child Vision in Action Award. So they're pretty much experts on whole child learning. Let's see if we can get this to work. Yes, this is Dr. Karen Endel, the principal at Butterfield Trail Elementary School, talking about whole child learning. I'm Courtney Cochran, the 2017 Arkansas Teacher of the Year, and I'm here with Dr. Karen Endel, whose school, Butterfield Trail Middle School, won the ASCD Whole Child Vision and Action Award this year in 2017. And so I'm really excited because this is a part of my platform, and I get to learn from Dr. Endel about the whole child. And so, Dr. Endel, I would just love to know, what does whole child mean to you, and how does that look and feel here at Butterfield Trail Middle School?
Whole child is about the whole child, obviously. It's not just a test score in the spring. Those are very important, and that's a keep separate. But we want to make sure all of our students are healthy, safe, engaged, supported, and challenged. So it's really important that we make sure our kids have had food, because if a child hasn't had food, they can't learn. And if they learn about nutrition and physical activity, there's also the social emotional part of the child, and especially at middle school level, it's kind of a crazy time in their life anyway. So we're working on that, and we have advisory groups, and we are constantly trying to get to know our kids better and find out more about them and their interests and hobbies. And then we want to engage our kids, and our mission is to ignite a passion for learning. So we're always looking for ways to engage them in different things that we do. And then we want to support every child. Sometimes they struggle with a concept that we're working on, and we find different ways that we can support them. And then, of course, we want to challenge every child. Even our most advanced students deserve to be challenged to their next level so that they can become all that they're capable of being. And that's what we try to do school-wide. So it's a big task. It's a lot of hard work, but and it's something that we're constantly trying to improve. So we're trying to find out from people like you and others, and what can we do to make things better constantly. So it involves our community as well.
So exciting. All the great things going on in Arkansas. Thank you so much, Dr. Endel.
Thank you.
At Butterfield Trail Middle School, students participate in integrated cooperative community-focused units called expeditionary learning projects. Expeditionary learning units. And this is a part of their whole child learning. We know that community-focused learning not only builds students' social and emotional capacity, but it also increases engagement by cultivating wonder and intrinsic motivation. And upon the completion of the units, students extend their learning by educating the public in these shows that they give to the public. The public comes in and they teach parents about, for example, here this is about natural disasters and community first responders, disaster preparedness as well. And then at the end of this expeditionary learning unit, the students contributed over 18,000 ounces of water to the United Way. Also at Butterfield Trail Middle School, the students take control of their own learning. They take ownership of their own learning by leading the conferences with parents. They reflect daily on habits of work and learning, but they also do that at the end of each quarter, and they show off their work to their parents or a mentor at these conferences.
Okay, so we're happy you guys could be here with us, and we had your child put together a presentation so she can be a leader of her own learning and analyze her work. So I'm going to let Maddie take the reins here.
Okay, well, glad you're here. And then this is the purpose.
Oh, it's not?
The student, teachers, and stuff. The student, teacher, the family. And then the learning targets of our video, not the edit. So this is my
We can go ahead and stop here. You can see Maddie is showing off her work, and she always, the students always give a strength, an area of strength, and an area of growth. So they really do have agency and ownership over their life.
You were put on
And as Dr. Endel said, the mission, the motto at Butterfield Trail Middle School is to ignite a passion for learning now. And that's how Butterfield does it. I think it's evident that they are achieving that mission with a whole child approach.
Thank you, Ms. Cochran. Questions?
Comments? Okay. Ms. Hudson?
I just appreciate all you're doing, learning the state, trying to bring back new ideas, and then not only that, sharing them with other teachers around the state. So you're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. All right, folks, you awake or are you
Ready? Okay, we're going to make it. Okay, we are now to Chair's report. A few things on my end. Y'all know my love for civics education. I had the chance this week to be a judge at the We the People state competition, and really talented team from Valley View, whose teacher is Jacob Lamberson, did an amazing job, and they won the state competition this year. So that was super exciting. I wanted, since we're kind of at the midway point, of course the state board year kind of runs from July to July. Since we're kind of at the midpoint, I wanted to just kind of talk a little bit about my vision of where we're headed in the second half of the year, in the first half of 2018. As chair, in many ways, my key goal during the first half of this year was really to build camaraderie on this board. We come from different backgrounds and have different perspectives, but my goal was really to build that camaraderie, and I think we've made great strides in that arena. In the second half of the year, I think there are three areas where I really hope that we get good work done. I think most obviously we have these two major rules that we are working on. Obviously, the educator rule, which is out for public comment, that work is begun on that, but we've still got work to do, and we know how important that rule is. And then I think we know very clearly how important the Act 930 rule is going to be, and that is going to take a tremendous amount of energy and brain power of this board. And I'm going to really look to, of course, the staff, but also Ms. Zook as our liaison for public school accountability to guide us through that process of what information we need to make wise decisions about that rule. So I think that is obviously very important substantive work. We have, in addition to our liaisons, of course, we have 2 task forces that are at work. We have the Family Engagement Task Force. We have the Student Discipline Task Force. And I think the key goal that I have there is that, by the end of this year, or the year of the first half of next year, we really need to think through what actionable items there are there, what steps this board needs to take on both those fronts. And I was very pleased the report that we'll hear about in just a minute from the Discipline Committee really begins to speak through where do we need to take this work, because I think it's always frustrating if task forces are meeting without clarity of purpose. And I think I think things are good energies happening here, but I want us to really hone in on actionable items. And then the third area where I think we do have to put some focus, and the Commissioner will speak to some of this in just a minute, is that obviously we have 3 school districts under state control at the present: Little Rock, Dollarway, Earl. Obviously Earl in the very initial moments of takeover, but for the other 2, certainly takeover now having been in place for a period of time. We have no clarity about when local control is going to return, but I do think that whenever the state takes over a school district, it has real responsibility to be sure that that school district is given back with the greatest chance of success with local control. And so I really want us as a board to think through what we can do to ensure with the greatest possibility of success local control. And that's going to look different in every district. I think it looked very different in Helena, West Helena, where I think things are moving forward with some positive things. But we need to think through on these 2, and you will hear a little bit about some thoughts on Little Rock from the Commissioner in just a minute from some of our conversations. But those are really kind of my big 3 areas where I see us focusing our energies in the first 6 months of next year. So I just wanted to kind of give a game plan of where our work is going in the next few months. We do have, I think, one thing we're going to do in the first half of next year is we're going to get out of Little Rock and North Little Rock, and thanks to Mr. Williamson, we've got some plans to head down to El Dorado. And Brett, do you want to speak a little bit about what you're thinking there?
Sure. My thought is to travel to El Dorado on Wednesday and make it a Wednesday-Thursday meeting instead of a Thursday-Friday. And on Wednesday, go see El Dorado's high school.
We're looking at March,
in
right?
March, I'm sorry, yes, in March meeting, which I believe is in the middle of testing, but superintendent down there said he'd work around us a little bit. But go through the high school and see the exciting things we've got going on there. The last time the Commissioner was in El Dorado, we took him by the junior high, and he was quite impressed with the garden out back that they had, and that may be a little early to see the garden, but go through there. And then we've got a really nice school-based health center at the middle school, and I'll take you guys through that as well. There's also a nonprofit organization there in El Dorado that does a lot of speech, PT, OT therapy, and hippotherapy, and I'd really like to get you guys out there to see that. We had talked a little bit about hippotherapy, I believe, last month. And then go down to our arts district and have folks from Murphy Oil Corporation and the school district come tell you guys a little bit more about the El Dorado Promise and the impact it has had on our community. And then there's another little known program that Murphy's had for a number of years, the Murphy Education Program, that will pay cash awards to students that do well on certain AP test exams, ACT, SAT scores. You can make almost $16,000 throughout your career in El Dorado if you hit every metric. But that's kind of my idea right now. We're still trying to firm up a few things.
Okay. So just in terms of looking at the schedule, our main board meeting in March, our business day is the 8th, so it's actually the earliest it could be. And so we were planning on meeting the 8th, 9th. This would transfer us to meeting going down on the 7th to El Dorado, and then coming back here for our business meeting on the 8th. Does that work for board members? Does it, commissioners, that work from y'all's perspective? It would not require the use of this facility, so we would not have any change here. Well, Thursday we were going to meet here anyway, so it would not. We would just cancel a Friday here. We would be in El Dorado on Wednesday, so we would not need to arrange anything at ADEQ. Does that sound?
Anything different?
Yeah, anything different. We would not need additional time.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Any
think
problem?
we can
Ms.
make
Wright?
that work.
Just a consideration for the task force, maybe that evening, then that Thursday, if we might be able to use this space, right, to have working dinners or something like that in that regard. I just know with us and our work in the family engagement unit, really wanting to keep that up. So just to offer that up and mostly a consideration. I don't see it at all infecting the desire to go to El Dorado, but if we could work with the committees around use of this facility on Thursday and to be able to continue conversations.
Okay. And if y'all need a lengthier lunch on Thursday,
Or
I mean,
something,
there are
yeah.
options.
Yeah,
so
yeah, exactly,
I'll let y'all
exactly.
Figure out what works best for those task forces works. Okay. Anything else? Okay. So go ahead, I guess, change your calendars for March in that way, and you'll let us know if anything changes between now and then. It would be the 7th and the 8th, so of March. 7th in El Dorado, 8th here as normal for our action items. Yeah. I just thought it was important to get it on folks' calendars. Okay. I'll just go around. Anybody else with reports this month? Ms. Cochran, we got your report. Ms. Newton, anything?
Yes. This week on Wednesday, I had to go to the co-op to get my fingerprinting done to renew my license. And while I was there, they invited.
Did you pass?
I hope so. But anyway, while I was there, they invited me to stay for their board of directors meeting and with their superintendents. And I was able to sit and listen, and it was very informative. They were able to share some of the things that they were most proud of and some of the things that they had concerns about. And I'll share a couple of each with you. The concerns that they had were, one of them was with the RISE initiative. They are very concerned that they're not going to be able to get all of their K-2 teachers trained in a timely manner because the co-op only has 50 slots, and Dawson is a huge co-op, and so that's one of their concerns. The co-op told them they thought they could handle it because I think 3 of their larger districts are not going to participate this summer, so I don't know the reasoning behind that, but that's a concern to the superintendents is being able to get all their K-2 teachers trained. The other concern that they had was one of the laws, acts passed last session, which was, I wrote it down so I remember it, and I can't find it right now, 1113, on the maximum number of students per day, the cap of 150. Once you go above that, then you have to start reimbursing, and they were concerned because before it had language in there about classes that lend themselves to large groups, and that's not in there. And so they had concerns about band and different football and athletics and different things that choir that you normally have a large group, and that would put those teachers over very quickly. So that was their 2 areas of concern, and I listened. I didn't do any commenting. But anyway, the areas that they were very proud of and very pleased with, some of them had heard a presentation from Tina Smith on PLCs, and they were very, very complimentary of her and the job that she was doing with that. And the other one, a commissioner will be proud of this one, was the Garden superintendent talking about their new simulator program that they have, just getting in the process of starting in response to a new industry that's coming into gardening.
in case you don't know, that in that area of the state, timber is a big deal. The timber industry, and there's a new industry that's going to come into the area, and so there's going to be a demand for log cutters and log loaders and all of the industry. He said that in that area they were going to need 600 loads of logs a day. I can't even comprehend that, but anyway, and so they have these simulators that they're going to be able to train their students on loaders, log loaders, and the cutters. And it doesn't sound like a big deal to us, but one of the industry men in the area said that he had taken a student and had spent 8 weeks training this student once he got out of school to do this job, because it's pretty hard. It's a difficult job. But these simulators are going to be able to have these students trained. The man that came in and looked at the simulator said it's exactly the same as what the cab of the actual thing would look like. And so these students are come out trained and be able to start out making $40,000 to $50,000 a year doing this job. And so that to me is schools learning about their community and then responding to the needs of the community. And that's what I hope that we're trying to do more and more of, is to get our young people trained in what our communities need. So that was what I heard this week, and so it was very informative to me, and I really appreciate them letting me stay and listen.
Great. Thank you so much. Dr. Hill, anything? Yep.
There's a couple of things that I don't want to leave them hanging since we live stream, and there's a couple of those issues you brought up that I think we can address that those superintendents had asked about, because there's been a lot of conversation, especially about Act 1113. But Stacy can talk about the training on the K2.
Okay. So Stacy Smith. So first off, I'm loving the fact that every month I get to come up here and just Rise Arkansas gets mentioned. It's probably the first professional development that we've offered in a long time that people are, there's a line to get in. Okay, people want it. Because we're doing the right thing and we're causing lots of conversation. In fact, yesterday, Dr. Cudney said that on the ride down with the superintendent that they spent over an hour in the car talking about reading and what they need to do in their area to improve reading. So those are good things. The Rise Arkansas K2 Academy has been a great success. This last year, again, we've trained 1,000 teachers. We did hold the numbers low to 25 teachers per coach for fidelity reasons. This next year, we will be able to get to the point where we have 2,000 teachers within our trainings. The comment about Dawson and the large districts not participating, we have pulled in large district specialists in reading to become trainers so that they can do their own training and not have to rely on the district. So Rogers School District, Bentonville, Little Rock, Benton's, the Bryants, those folks have trainers that we're training, literacy specialists that we're training, so that the co-ops don't have to be the provider for that. I think the biggest concern about we can't get into Rise Academy is the legislation that requires by 2021 that teachers demonstrate proficiency, and we are going to make Rise Academy one prescribed pathway, but that legislation also allows different pathways, and so we're working on creating those different pathways. District superintendents, I did a Zoom call this last week with a co-op, and that same comment was, we can't get our teachers in. And my comment was, well, you don't have to wait for your teachers to get into the PD. Here's a great book study for you to start. All professional development that literacy specialists are offering at the cooperatives are aligned to the science of reading, which is what the Rise Academy is based on. So get your people involved in those, even standalone days for professional development. We are creating the AETN series that is based on science of reading, and those will start rolling out in June. So we have lots of professional development coming out. Our reading conference that we'll offer again this spring, we're bringing in some great speakers on that. Again, we're providing lots of opportunities, but the thing that's most exciting about this is that we have superintendents saying, we want to talk about reading. And I think because of that, we're going to see a shift in the reading. So I'm glad that they were talking about it.
Yes, they were.
On Act 1113, so just to clarify, the exception for large group instruction and I'm going to look over here to Roy and Debbie to make sure I don't say it wrong, but there was never an exception in law for those classes that lend themselves to large group instructions. Those were things that we addressed through the standards. The difference now under this new act is that it puts that 150 student limit in the statute, requires us to cite it in our standards, and says, and this is the important part, and says you must pay, you must pay teachers that go over that amount, which removes some of the flexibility with respect to the paying them part. We still have the ability on the class size for those large group instruction, but we don't have the ability to do anything on paying teachers, and that's where a lot of the superintendent's concerns come in, because we've been very clear that the relationship between the district and the teachers is a contractual issue that's now governed by a new state law. So we are staying out of that part of it, but it does create some situations where districts are asking us for guidance and direction. And we've also talked to legislators about, I mean, it really was not intended to have the result that it has had. But we believe there will continue to be conversation, and as you go to co-ops, you may hear about this, or as you interact with districts, until such time as it can be changed, which at this point, 2019 session is what the only timeline that we know where it can be fixed, unless legislature and the governor create another opportunity between now and then.
That was one of their questions, was when could it be fixed, and they didn't think it could be in the physical session. They thought it would have to be in the next regular session.
Did I cover all of that? Okay, all right, thank you.
Dr. Hill? That we'll hold on that till later on. So anything just on, okay. Mr. Williams, anything else?
I went with some business people to visit the Pikeview Early Learning Center. That's their pre-K and 3-year-old school that the North Little Rock, all the kids in the North Little Rock School District can attend if you're 3 or 4. They, went into the classroom, sat in the little chairs, talked to the kids, did high fives, went to the learning stations. But I think the thing that I came away with, North Little Rock has a number of teenage parents who are still in high school, and they make arrangements for that parent to come with their 3 or 4-year-old child to the Early Learning Center, drop them off, do their parent thing, and then they have a bus that then take them to their high school so they, in fact, can finish their education. So I know a lot of them are doing that, but, me, anytime I get a chance to brag on North Little Rock, I do.
Great. Ms. Rice, anything? All right, great. Commissioner, your report.
So first I want to talk about a report that Dr. Pfeffer and I received last month at the CCSSO, and I think all of you have this. It says Arkansas Public Schools. This is donorschoose.org. And when we got the state report, what really struck me was the number of teachers who are using this as a way to raise money for things in their classroom. And if you look through the project, some, you will see that they're trying to raise money, looking at the pie chart on page 6. We track pretty closely with what the national trend is. But you often hear the concern that, well, teachers are having to raise private funds for things that, or having to spend out of their pocket for things that maybe should be paid for by the district or the school level. Books, lab equipment, and probably that's the one that, as a you know, as an engineer, that was striking to me, that in Arkansas we're having to buy lab equipment, and teachers are having to raise private funds for that or seek donations. That would be a concern. And this is, you know, this really doesn't dive deep into the details of these projects, but lab equipment makes sense. Why does that make sense? Well, we just changed science standards. Science now has a lot more consumables if we are implementing those standards properly. So, you know, just wanted you to have this to see what is happening around the state, the numbers of teachers who are involved. And this is just Donors Choose. There are other similar types of fundraising, online fundraising methods that I think teachers are using, but this is one that is really focused on educators. So I'll give this to you for your information. The second thing I want to talk about is I think we're all copied on a letter from Mr. Antoine Phillips. He was asking for a follow-up for anything that we're working on regarding the report from the Little Rock Area Public Education Stakeholders Group. So Dr. Barth and I worked on a letter to respond to him, and I'll go over the highlights of the letter. We're going to sign the letter and send it to him, but we'll make sure you get copies of it for your files. In the area of collaboration, there are three things that Dr. Barth and I have really talked about as far as how can we create some of these conversations so that the collaboration between traditional public schools and open enrollment charter schools can be more productive and be less combative. And unbeknownst to us, Dr. Mark, do you know how to pronounce it? Demaz, I think is how he pronounces the name, of Mosaic Church. He had actually reached out to Mr. Poore and offered his facility and offered, you know, his service in helping bring together collaborative conversations with the area public schools and public charter schools. So that's something that I've given liberty to Mr. Poore to continue with those conversations to get that set up. But that was something Dr. Barth and I thought would be a good idea, and organically that seems to be happening. We also have been talking about working through the Family Engagement Grant. And Gina's out there. I've talked to Ms. Dickey about maybe hosting some of the conversations with parents. You know, one of the things that we heard is, you know, well, we'd really like to know, why do parents make the choices that they make regarding their school, their child's schools. So that's you know, another set of conversations that we want to have. And you know that certainly Dr. Barth has been very interested in a conversation between advocates. You know, the advocates that weigh in at different times depending on the issues that come up regarding education, and having those groups, as far apart as they sometimes seem to be, bringing them together for a conversation as well, with that goal being hopefully a de-escalation of heated rhetoric when it comes to the public debate around public school issues. So we have talked to Sharice West Scantleberry of Winthrop Rockefeller Foundation, and she has expressed her willingness to facilitate a meeting or one meeting. We'll see how it goes and see if we have follow-up meetings, but at least get that conversation started. So those three areas of collaboration. The fourth thing that I mentioned, that we mentioned in the letter, was the discipline committee. Discipline was an issue that the stakeholders group referenced, and I know that there's work going on there, and we wanted to make sure that they understood that we have listened to their concerns, and we'll continue that work. The other was, again, related to discipline, the research on student discipline, not removing students from the educational setting. Another large area that the stakeholders group worked on was the issue of a co-op, educational service co-op for Pulaski County. And that's something that's been discussed a few times over the years. And I have actually had an initial meeting with the superintendents of Little Rock, Pulaski County, Jacksonville, North Pulaski, and the North Little Rock school districts about what that could look like. Now, knowing that North Little Rock already participates with Archford Co-op, Jacksonville, North Pulaski are participating with the Wilbur Mills Co-op. Not taking anything away from that, but there's, because Little Rock and Pulaski County are so big, how do we make sure those services that other districts have access to are accessible to those districts as well, and the benefit of kind of getting out beyond the borders of your individual school district. So have some follow-up meetings on that coming up in January. And the suggestion from the superintendents was, yeah, we're here as traditional public school superintendents, but we think the charter schools should be involved, which I thought was, falls in line with the whole concept of collaborative conversations. And just to point out that Academics Plus, Maumelle Charter School, they are already participating with the Archford Co-op. So Superintendent McGill has been involved there for some time. But, as the charter sector matures, there are some elements there that might be helpful for charters as well as the traditional public schools. And then the last point that I made in the letter is to make sure they knew that the Walton Family Foundation has engaged IFF, and that is the organization that is looking at the data for the Pulaski County traditional schools and charter schools on performance, on numbers of seats, and what areas of the county that they are in. Again, back to the concern the stakeholders group had that, look, we don't really have a good handle on the environment that's out there regarding the numbers of seats and the performance that's happening in those schools. All those conversations have really been in isolation about either that district or that school or that charter, and this is a way that we can kind of bring that more to a holistic approach with that data. So I'll be glad to answer any questions, and again, Dr. Barth wants to weigh in on any of this because we've had conversations about it as we've moved on, but I appreciate Mr. Phillips asking for that update, and we will send this to him and to the rest of the members of that stakeholders group, Monday when the mail goes out. So,
Ms. Wright.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for that. I was wondering what was the status. I did see that email come in as well. Could we possibly get a copy of that letter?
Or absolutely.
After it's mailed? Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
We'll sign it, and we'll try to find a copier and make sure you get before you leave today, have a copy of it.
This way, if we receive any questions
Sure.
and such, that we can point to that.
Yeah, we're happy to do that.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll just make one quick comment. That's a great synopsis of it. I just do, in terms of my earlier comments about what we can do as a board to create the healthiest atmosphere for a return to local control. I do think that I really respect the ardent advocacy on both sides over the last years, and that those folks have been, really been heartfelt in their views, and I think that unquestionably, as we move, hopefully, in the coming year or year and a half, whenever, we don't know the timeline, to school board elections, then that will be a good, healthy democratic debate. But I do think that once there is a school board with local power, there has to be an atmosphere where there is some sense of collegiality and respect and a focus on the interest of children. And so I think anything that we can do as a board to create an atmosphere where that can be the norm, I think that's going to be good for the Little Rock School District. And so I just want to say how much I respect those advocates and how much they care about education in Central Arkansas. But that's my view, is that the volume must be turned down just a bit so that we can actually have an atmosphere where success can move forward. That's my perspective. Ms. Zook and then Ms. Reitha.
Go ahead.
No. Thank you. No, just to say thank you for that, Dr. Barth, and thank you as well, Commissioner. And as you all are planning meetings this next spring, I know you referenced the meeting with Dr. Wes Scantleberry. Completely defer to y'all's judgment to the extent to which it's helpful for us to be in the room or not in the room to answer any questions or things like that. I know that at times that point of contention has actually been around roles or what transpired as related to this board, but at the same time in building the relationship may not be helpful to have us there. So just know, and I won't speak on behalf of our colleagues, but I've noticed and respected everyone's energy to show up and to answer questions. And if it is helpful at any point for us to be there, I would just say don't hesitate to ask.
Anything else?
Right.
Ms. Zook, did you?
I think part of this wasn't the point I was going to make, but I have 2 points. One, I do think that when people express their passion in writing, it's often misunderstood, or if you don't like the person much, or you question their motives, you look at the writing one way, and if you do, they write the other way. I've got relatives that I only talk to because anyway. But my other point is that since Mr. Phillips made his letter fairly widely known, I wonder if you would be willing to ask the papers or people to also publish that in response, so the public in general, little or big, that watch those proceedings, that they in fact see that there is a response.
I will get with the communications team and determine the best way to move forward with that. Yeah. And Cynthia's here, so we'll make sure she gets a copy of it before she leaves today.
Great. Any other comments or questions? Was that your last?
I just appreciate the efforts that you have thought through to encourage collaboration, because I think that if we can get them talking to one another nicely, we can make some progress. So thank you for that.
Wonderful. Okay, we'll now move to our last stage, which is our reports from committees and liaisons. And of course, I've lost my page here. I believe first up is family engagement.
Thank you, and I'm truly sorry Miss Dean is not well and can't be here because I know she was just so instrumental in the meeting that we had last week. And obviously, I also have to thank for the whole board. I know some of you work with Miss Hollis in different capacities, but I do want to say our family engagement work wouldn't be possible without her, and she keeps us on track and online. And with that, because she is doing a lot of work on our behalf on the back scenes, Miss Hollis, I know especially as coming out of today, we'll have more, I think, tangible things to share. If maybe that could be posted here, as I saw Dr. Hill's report on here, that maybe, especially as we start going into the next year, to share for our colleagues to see the hard work that has been put together, and give them an opportunity to review some of those materials as well. But I do want to, in front of everybody, just acknowledge the asset that Ms. Hollis has been to the work of this task force. And then also I saw Ms. Dickey in the audience as well, our wonderful facilitator, and I'm grateful as well that with the work of the agenda, the team that's come together, being that liaison with the department and with us on the state board. So it's just been in all of my years here on the state board to be ending in this way, in this really collaborative process on an issue that's so important. It gives me hope, right? And Dr. Barth, I can give you with affirmation, by the end of this year, you will actually see some tangible outcomes from this task force. And so just as a quick update to all, because I know I referenced in our last meeting Dr. Aurelio Montemayor's visit from IDRA in San Antonio, and our equity center down there that supports the state of Arkansas. We had a very strong visioning session after our last meeting last month. And I was truly inspired because it came off the margins of a very long day and went into a quite long evening. But everyone was so committed, we actually had to stop conversation after a certain point and say, all right, we've been in here 2.5 hours, and we need to respect people's evenings and things like that at that point. But it easily could have gone from a 2.5 hour to a full day session. Everyone was really excited to dive in to the process and commit to that, including Commissioner, your team, so many of which showed up for that event. And I think that was really our focus with this conversation, because we had started off with the family engagement from a high level kind of piece of what that meant, what we might do, to then find out and have a specific opportunity around specifically the invitation of Arkansas to be part of setting these family engagement standards and needing to react to a timeline that was being set at the national level. And so this was kind of our chance to take a step back and just say what this means and what we want for Arkansas. So without getting into too much detail, I will say that initial documents were created around vision and timeline and stakeholders, and that's actually what we're diving into today, is that kind of wordsmithing and finalizing those materials. And then with that, Megan, Ms. Abels, is going to speak to us because her committee and work at the national level is very much moving forward, and she's been great in being able to bring us some timelines as related to other states and samples from other states as well. And so we're going to try and, she's had another work session, hear more from where the CCSO is going with this, and how we bring that together with our process. But I do think what you all will see in early next year will be a convening of stakeholders. So this is some of the relationship building, and I extend this to Dr. Barth and the Commissioner with your own conversations as related to Little Rock, because there may be some opportunity to do some build bridging in this broader frame that then lends itself to relations back in the district. But one of the first tasks will actually be to have a stakeholders convening with a variety of different groups from different sectors to start giving some input, both even into the vision and timeline, but also to the process and then the standards themselves. And this is not just going to be a commitment for this year, but for multiple years, right? As this is a longer term vision that's going to extend at least a good 3 years out, right? In terms of how we get to a place of not just developing standards, but supporting districts and schools in ways that these get realized. And so knowing that and knowing that everybody at the table has something to offer, including Ms. Dickey, that was one of the reasons we've asked Dr. Montemayor to be a resource to us in this process at other times when we do need an outside facilitator. This way, every single one of us who are Arkansans and passionate on this issue can be at the table as a participant. And so we did, and thanks to Ms. Hollis and to the Commissioner and to my partner, Ms. Dean, in being able to sign off on that opportunity. This will be one that comes at no cost to the state because it is built into the federal funds they receive as an equity center, but it is one where when we need an outside facilitator, we will be able to draw on them now as a resource, and we've formalized that vis-a-vis the request in the letter. So those are really the highlights I want to give at this point, because I want to, I think, again, a lot of the details that we'll be able to offer will come after today's meeting and the draft documents that we create, but please look to us to have some reports for you, more formal, for our next session. And then for any other state board members who would have an interest in this upcoming stakeholders meeting, to please know that we are looking at probably sometime in January for this, and we'll gladly share that information for anyone else that would like to be involved in this process. But I'm very excited that this is definitely, even has exceeded my wildest expectations from a point of conversation to actually having something tangible, and couldn't have been better timed with what's happening with CCSO and now with ESSA, and us being able to actually offer something tangibly to districts in this moment that we hope will result not just in outcomes for our children in their academics, but actually a culture shift, right, of how we think about education and who's involved in education. And so Ms. Cochran's presentation couldn't have been better timed around the whole child, because that really is what's motivating and compelling in this, and where she She was absent last month, very rightly so, representing our great state of Arkansas at another opportunity. I'm really excited because I know she's done so much learning this year that she'll be back at our meeting this month, especially as we kind of dive in and really set to what the challenge you have set to us has been accepted, Dr. Barth, of producing something for next month for everyone to see. But we are serious about getting something done. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for a great report, and thanks for all of y'all's hard work on this. Ms. Hook?
Yes. One of the things that parents have mentioned to me, because I told them that, you're having this group and you're trying to do and trying to get feedback, is they were saying if they could go to their district's website and say, what are my choices about special ed? What are my choices about choice? Choicing in districts, choicing out, and all that. So I don't know whether the individual district would need to put that on, or if it's possible. Eric's not here, but is it possible for on the web for them to just link to the state? So if they want to know about opportunity school choice, or what's available for my child who has a special ed need, or if my child goes into foster care, just sort of not really parents' rights, although it is sort of that, but they don't know where to go, and then they don't know who to talk to. And I get enough questions when I go into my districts that I know that they're starved for information, and they don't need to have to wait till somebody like me shows up that they can, ask a lot of those. So if there's some way we could, I don't know if we can require the districts to put that there, or just sort of strongly encourage them to put it there, but some way for parents to know it's a whole lot different than when they were in school. So, I think if we respond to what they're requesting, then we will in turn get them more engaged in some of the other things you're talking about.
No, thank you so much, Ms. Zook, and I'm glad that you brought that up. One of the goals that we've talked about since the very beginning of this is creating sort of that bank of best practices, right, where we can't oblige districts, but we can definitely lift up for them best practices, and then talking about even trying to do some in-person interactions, right, where we're celebrating and being able to help inspire districts to do this. But that it's a good point for me at this stage to also remind all of us that school districts are going to, as part of this ESSA process, and as they bring it locally, engage stakeholders, just as we were required to here at the state level. And I've been really excited that our districts are already starting to show some leadership and initiative with this in terms of starting to get ready for that, and or starting to align maybe ongoing stakeholder family committees that they might have with this upcoming ESSA process, right, and what's going to happen in the districts. And then when Mr. Montemayor was here, he actually, I think he's garnered the commitment of already 6 districts in West Arkansas who are going to be working through this process, and he's going to be doing some in-person coaching as a way of directly linking the state to local, right, conversations on family standards. And so even districts now are signing up for assistance and commitment to jump ahead on the curve on this, and being able to start doing that learning, so that by the time as this process continues to roll out, we'll be able to do even further peer-to-peer learning as related to these standards and works and best practices and things like this. So as we're saying, it's not just for us, different from the past. It's not just looking at family engagement isolation. It's talking about a culture shift, right, as we're talking about this and embedding it in what's already going to be those ongoing conversations of ESSA, right, so that this is featured there and part of that process.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. I will now turn it over to Dr. Hill with the Task Force on Discipline.
Thank you.
And you do have materials on
that. We did.
Yeah.
But I just had these copies because what I wanted to do.
This is the same that was online.
Same thing, but for you to have these and take one, and if you could, for your input, take those. If you want to email me some, as I follow with Ms. Lamb, any thoughts and ideas that you would have that to look at as we're in our preliminary stages of identifying, as you've asked us to do, our specific goals moving forward. One thing, Mariah, that I know with your community engagement, and that may be something that we can do collaboratively, as you know, and I know that Sharice being in dual committees really helps, but as much as we can, because I've gotten some comments from emails and things about people concerned about student discipline. So as much as the community engagement piece could help be a part of that, we're killing two birds with one stone. And so we collaboratively work together and make sure we're addressing the community's engagement in this collectively and not in isolation. And so, however you see that with Sharice being there and myself, we can work. And I'm not going to read this to you. Everybody knows what I wanted from the board oversight, any ideas and input as we moving forward, so you can see where we're going, rather us get down the line and then you come back and have some concerns or some questions about what we're doing, because we're still in the preliminary stages, as you said, Dr. Barr, of trying to move forward on this. And if you think we're getting off, track or something, this is the time now so we can move. And that's why Mariah and Sharice doing community engagement, people want to be involved in what we're doing in the process, rather than always waiting to the outcomes. And one thing, that we're concerned about is students being put out of school, and then not having a negative impact on the school and the testing and everything that was coming to our concern. And so we want to look at ways that we can do that. And the zero tolerance guidance that we have in place right now has a negative outcome to our academic achievement, in which now we see that we're then community safety is at risk, and it just has such great ripple effects. So we're trying to find ways, and within our last couple of meetings, Ms. Lamb and I met last week with Fellowship Bible Church, just donated a new building to our kids program. And we made a visit over there, and I'm going to take the commissioner and request Mr. Poore to attend to look at that. Right now in alternative schools, and she shared this yesterday with our discipline committee, the commissioner, our middle school and our high school alternative education population, they're together. And that can be problematic when you have middle school with high schools when you're dealing with issues of discipline. So Ms. Lamb is thinking that this could possibly be a middle school alternative setting in collaboration from a community standpoint with the Little Rock School District. And that's what I want to get our teachers' thoughts involved in the process. Ms. Lamb thought that we were way ahead of the game because it's already a school, has all the boards, everything in it. And if the law now states that 1st through 5th grade, you cannot suspend out of school, but that's not the case in middle school. And when we suspend those kids, we're disengaging them. And what I've found in talking to Willie Davis, who made the presentation to the discipline committee, when young people are suspended from school, they're often disengaged from a positive environment, and they've gone back and put into a negative environment, and that negative environment continues to swell within that individual. So if we can find possible ways to put them in another positive environment, even though they've been disruptive to the education process, which is why we usually suspend them, but keep them educationally involved, because in most cases you're sending them back, there's nobody home, there's no guidance, they end up on the street. If you look at how many homicides through teenagers that Little Rock is experiencing right now, in many cases it's been dropouts. So I think we're curing a lot of ills if we find solutions to these problems. And I will invite all the board members that would like to see the facility, because I think it could be something as we move forward to look at, are we doing the best service to our students, even in middle school, to suspend them when you're still in that 6th, 7th grade formative ages, that you still have a chance to change that student. Rather than send that student home, there's no change taking place at home. And I had that experience take place with our little 6 and Gold program. I had one little young man who was very rude to me on the football field and basically gave me some challenging words. And the coaches wanted to respond in a negative sense. I said, you can't respond to him like that. There's a reason he's talking to us like that. That's his normal. I said, but what we have to do is keep that little person engaged, and then we can help him change his behavior. We can't disengage him from us, sitting him over there without teaching him. Well, that's what we're hoping to implement moving forward, because I don't understand how we can send a 6th or 7th or 8th grader home when he's in changing years, that tree can still be straightened out. The older you get, the less likely that is to happen. And so I want us as a board to really look at that. And as you see, you know, let's really review, does zero tolerance really help? Now, I've been to a couple of schools, and, you know, if a kid is that detrimental to the environment, and like I asked, one kid was getting suspended. I said, did he, you know, was there a gun? Was there a terrorist attack? Whatever. If they are prone to that, deal with it with the law. But we got to find ways, rather than just the easiest, hey, suspend the kid and send them out, and we have a negative impact to our whole community. And so that's what I want your input back as a board. I know you all been in the classroom and can give some insight that I don't necessarily have from the age that we're really talking about right now, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. So any ideas that you have, Ms. Lamb, is just, I have never seen a more passionate person about alternative education. And
will this be similar to the program that they have at St. Mark's?
Well, yes, it is, and it all will be in partnership. See, it's not in isolation. I mean, there may be times. What we have is that we have the Little Rock Police Department officer housed there, which, you know, that's all. You know, we're trying to build that partnership. So now you're building relationships, you know, with the Little Rock, with LRPD. So any thoughts that you have, and that's why I said, is that a community engagement collaboration that we can use to make sure that we're hearing the concerns of everybody, so nobody feels like this came downhill and it was affected. And Commissioner, did you have anything that you want to say based off the deal? Okay.
We have a couple initial thoughts. I see Ms. Newton as well. I mean, I do think for both task forces, I think because, you know, we have spent so much time and energy on Little Rock issues in recent years, and because of, you know, the visibility of Little Rock, I do think we do need to be conscious in this work of thinking statewide and thinking about the diversity of issues that exist related to challenges facing families, discipline issues statewide. So that would be my one challenge, is to think beyond Little Rock. And the second, and these are kind of connected, the new, of course, as you know, the discipline legislation was changed fairly significantly earlier this year. It's still 2017, isn't it? Earlier this year. But there are still some reporting requirements, and I visited Mr. Saunders as well about this, and so if the degree to which you can incorporate into y'all's work that good data that is available on the web at the department, but then also is required under that legislation, if we could kind of incorporate that into y'all's work, I think that would be really smart, and I think would lead to some wise guidance in terms of where the real patterns of problems are across the state. Those are a couple of initial thoughts.
And I didn't mean to seem like we were just isolated on Little Rock, because I have visited other places with Ms. Lamb, and so we were just, what I think, if there is a model that we could take that we're able to do here, because we can experiment and pilot here.
I totally agree. I think thinking about it in a pilot way rather than
no question.
Yeah, I think that's a perfect thought. Ms. Newton?
So y'all read my mind. You know, I think the idea of separating middle school and high school is right on target, because you have to handle middle schoolers totally different than you handle high school kids. The level of activity, the relationships, all of those things, it's different, and so it's on target. But then I would encourage you to somehow or another make this public, so other districts in the state that are having these same problems can see how are you making these connections in the community to be able to find these ways to keep from having to suspend. You know, what are you doing? Allow them to come in and visit. You know, put out some sort of you know, these are the steps that we did to reach out to the public. These are the steps that we are doing to in with kids every day. These are things that we're doing. So somehow or another make that public to the other districts in the state that are experiencing some of the same problems. So I don't know if it could be through the department website or through the Little Rock website or setting up your own thing, you know. But I think somehow or another we need to take this and make it bigger. But yes, you're completely on track, separating middle school and high school.
Dr. Hill, I'm wondering, and again, it's been through my process, and partly because NASB has been a resource for me on so many different levels. But I know I've turned to NASB and through the relationships I've had there to try and get some out-of-state guidance on, as we think about this, just some best practices, knowing that we're not in a bubble as Arkansas and thinking on some of these big challenges for us, family engagement, and you all, student discipline. Would it be at all helpful for me to make an introduction email to some folks that are working on student discipline issues through the NASB, and I just feel like, especially now that you all are getting to that point, right, you're saying, okay, we want to get something done, and then as Dr. Barth was saying, right, thinking of that state perspective, I just have found them helpful. We know what's going to work best for our state, right, at the end of the day, but I've found it helpful getting that perspective, and sometimes they can just do some research and put some time into things that we may not have otherwise. So, all right, coming out of this meeting, if that's all right, I'll make some introduction to some NASB team members that I think would love to just connect you with some resources or guidance, maybe sometimes just even be a sounding board in this process.
And Commissioner, did Ms. Lamb mention that somebody had called her, yesterday, about what other things that were going on around the country that she was, do you remember that?
Not specifically, but I know she's heavily networked with other
around
the country.
I'll copy her in on that so she can execute. And one other thing, she was so excited about this building that from another school in Northwest Arkansas, because the school is not ADA, but yesterday we had a chairlift donated to the building so we can meet ADA standards. She's already started doing that because, she said the number is not great, but from time to time you will have discipline issues involving challenged students. So she's moving quite fast to hopefully maybe be able to pilot something in the last quarter, just as a way, so we can see if there's something that we can do for the fall. She wants to be able to do that, and so I just told her I want to bring that to you all to look after spring break, the last 9 weeks, because the building is 80% ready to go. We don't have to do anything. It's there. So I hope I can show that to you all in January, February.
Any other questions, comments? Great. Thank you, Dr. Hill, and we look forward to more good work. Just a few things on the Forward Arkansas front. I had a chance to meet with Susan Harriman and the rest of the team there last week, and a quick update on where their focus is. As you may remember, in the ESSA, I'm blanking on the tank. I just had a total blank. What we sent to the department, the ESSA plan. I just couldn't find the plan, that word. So in the ESSA plan, in the appendix, of course, there was a template for how we will report data at the individual school and school district level, and the variety of indicators that would be on that. One thing that Forward is really focused on doing is figuring out how they can create data reports on individual schools, starting with the Forward communities, but then using it as a scalable option, using as much of that ESSA data as makes sense, and then adding some of their own indicators that are part of the Forward initiative. So what is the availability of wraparound services in that community? What are the issues in that community related to employment, workforce development, all those other things that are a part of Forward's work. And so it would get folks used to seeing data in the same form, both on the ESSA front and then also on the Forward front in that same report card. So those single-page report cards. So that is one thing that they are doing some work on, starting with the Forward communities. Second thing is they're doing a lot of work around data organization, so that different actors, parents, educators, civic leaders, public officials, researchers have access to the same data, because I think that has been an ongoing challenge in the state. And so that's one area. Second area is around equity. And as you know, they are focused heavily upon internet access in some of our most challenged areas of the state. Of course, there are different things that work best in different parts of the state because of the geography. There will be news coming there. Of course, continuing the pre-K work in preparation for implementation of the new funding, but then also future funding for high-quality pre-K, and then also working with the folks at the Office of Educational Innovation for innovation beyond using the lessons learned of the forward communities statewide, which I think has been a real concern. They're also very much focused on support for the level 5 communities, and they are specifically working with doing work in all 3 communities that are now under state control. We've talked about the partnership with the Clinton School Practicum team on Little Rock Middle Schools and their communities. They are doing work in Dollarway, supporting the community planning processes there, and really starting mentoring programs in the high school and middle school levels in Dollarway. And then coming online will be some work with Earl on some of their technical assistance work and capacity building that the commissioner and Ms. Harriman have been in touch about. So those are kind of some of the big areas of work right now. I think at the big picture level, Forward is really now past its initial implementation and really thinking about the maturation phase. And so there probably will be some organizational changes as they move from implementation to kind of maturation of that organization next year. So those are kind of highlights on the forward front. Speaking of ESSA, any news, Ms. Newton?
I had reached out to Ms. Smith this week, and she says still haven't gotten a phone call within the 120 days. I don't know if you've heard since then, but once they get the call, then they'll have 15 days to respond. The 120 days ends in January. So, I don't know if there's more news of it.
CCS, yeah, I was in contact with CCSSO last week. They said that they had seen the list that of the states that were supposed to be called last week. We weren't on it, so they expected that meant we might hear something this week. We have not heard anything this week. So that's what we know.
Well, I don't know if no news is good news or no news is bad news, but there's no news.
No news is no news.
Let me, though, say that just because we haven't heard anything doesn't mean we haven't been engaged in tweaking what we have already seen are some areas that we can improve it. So, and just anticipating some of the questions that we might receive, we've already engaged with conversation with stakeholders of making those adjustments. So we're proceeding just like we've already heard feedback, only that feedback has been stakeholder feedback and not Department of Ed feedback. So we feel very good in just in modeling how this needs to be a continuous improvement process. And we're ready for the call when it does come, but we feel very confident about our plan as submitted with the changes that we know that need to be made.
I'm sure we will hear soon after y'all do. Ms. Zook, on state and federal accountability, anything new there?
Public school accountability?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I thank Ms. Kaufman because she keeps me well informed, and they're a busy group over there. I don't know if y'all realize that really it's 4 sections under one umbrella. Under the school improvement, they're completing the transitional plans, which we saw yesterday. And what we saw yesterday was sort of a Reader's Digest version of a lot of other things that were going on. And maybe our levels of concern would have taken on a different level of concern had we seen the whole thing, but nonetheless, that's good and going on. And they're in the process of approving the 1003, that's the federal programs money. Under school performance, they're running preliminary data reports for schools. And then the huge undertaking under Standards for Accreditation, those were, that committee in '83 was chaired by Hillary Clinton. I was on the committee. Some of the older current superintendents were on the committee. But it needs to be done, and they're doing a great job of that. And then lastly, Tracy Webb is the new director of the 21st Century CCLC, Century Community Learning Centers, correct? Great. So we welcome that, and if you have any in-depth questions, Ms. Kaufman is here to answer.
All right. Any questions? This will be a monthly. We're going to be all accountability all the time for the next few months. So, okay. Next up on the liaison front is Human Resources, and Ms. Chambers is on the phone, but I think there's a delay. So do you know anything, Commissioner, on Human Resources, or Dr. Pfeffer? Anything there?
Well, she's coming to the microphone. Is there anything, because I'm getting a lot of out in the state saying the audio yesterday was hardly understandable, and is it
there was a network problem, I think.
Oh, it wasn't. It's not this building or us or anything. It's just, it's not Gail. It's not Gail, and it's not Kevin. That we know for sure. So, okay, so they can expect it to be better in the future if there's not a lot of traffic in the house, right?
Yeah.
All right, thank
you. That's something that when you are a guest in someone else's home, there's only so much that you can do. And so, yeah, so we, I'm not sure what else was going on in the building, but there was a lot of traffic on the local network. And yeah, so as when we get back home, we shouldn't have any of those types of problems, and that room will be very well technologically advanced to make sure that we don't encounter any of those types of problems.
Yeah, Dr. Pfeffer.
Okay, good morning, Ivy Pfeffer, Department of Education. And we have a lot of different things going on with our strategic performance management work with regards to our human resources. A lot of it is just continuing to look at how do we have a really strong system of not just an induction but an onboarding system for our employees. And that is even going beyond just what do I do when I come in and sit down for my day-to-day work, but really understanding the vision and the mission and goals of our strategic plan, and how, and Commissioner's done a really good job of really helping us to remember that each one of us every day, either directly or indirectly, is impacting a student in our public schools. So we've had a lot of really good conversations recently in our coffee with the Commissioner time. Every employee has had a chance to come in and visit with him. Those have been some great conversations. We are updating milestones in our strategic plan so that we're constantly looking at what is it that our employees need to grow and develop professionally to better do their jobs, and also looking at how do we create a process so that we are continuing to increase the diversity of our employees within our workforce as well. So, so just a lot of different initiatives around that, starting almost like we do with the teacher pipeline, the attracting and recruiting all the way through our hiring, and then developing our employees so that they're successful.
This may be a little different from that, but are you all still doing orientation for new state board members? Do you still do that like they did when I went on several? Okay. I wonder if y'all would consider having a serving board member be in that orientation, because as helpful as, and I can say this because none of the people are still here that were here then, as helpful as it was on certain areas, the very first things I needed to know and vote on were not covered. And I got notice on Friday, and my first board meeting was on Monday, and it was 2,200 pages of information. So maybe if you had a current board member help with that orientation, if that's not radical, and if it is radical, then maybe we can have our own separate orientation.
I would caution that the gathering of 2 or more board members creates a public meeting, so especially when discussing. So I would modify that, though, to maybe bring in someone who had recently been on the board and maybe was no longer on the board, like Toyce or Vicky, someone like that, or as we have some rotations coming up, maybe one of you would like to come back and be part of that conversation. But just throwing a caution out that we want to make sure we don't run into any violations of the Open Meetings Act.
Well,
but we could invite.
If it was announced, the press was invited.
Well, we could do that too.
And you
so
know,
I'm not saying we
we're the
couldn't.
only board in the state that adheres to that rule, which I agree with the rule, and I think it's a great thing. But I know that no other boards adhere to that, so good for us.
I don't know that, but I'll take your. I won't argue about it.
Well, I do think, one thing that my perspective on board orientation, it was really getting hit with a lot at that initial orientation, and I really needed that orientation spread across the first 6 months. I was on the board because I could kind of, because our issues that we deal with really come in cycles across the board, across the year. And you kind of need new orientation when you get to each new issue. And that's one thing that we tried to implement this year was to put these little when an issue comes up that we haven't dealt with for a while, put a reminder of the statute and the process and all that, so that there's at least some mini reorientation built in. So I think it's an issue we need to think about. It does also remind me that one thing that was done a number years ago, there was a process started to look at our operating procedures on the board, and we never really got to a conclusion of that. So one thing we may want to talk about is whether it's time to look at our rules of procedure, because I believe they are 6 or 8 years old, maybe 8 or 10 years old.
Yeah, and I think that may have been something that Kendra had started working on.
She was working on it, yeah.
And now that we are up to full strength in our legal department, that I'll follow up with Lori and see where that, if that has stalled or if that work's still going, and bring it.
I believe it was actually when Kendra, before she was promoted, I think that's when that project got lost. Yeah, Ms. Salsford.
I can go ahead and add.
Yeah.
Yes, when Kendra left, that was passed to me, and
due to our short staff, I didn't get far with it, but we have assigned that to one of our new attorneys. She's in the process of making updates, and then that will be sent out to all of you for your comments and input. So definitely we want to get the new procedures in place as soon as possible, and then also we could possibly have that attorney be part of the training for new board members or sending out updates to all of you.
Thank you, Courtney. I know you've been working on Act 930 for like the last year and a half, so yeah.
Okay, and then finishing up here, Ms. Reith with NASB.
Yes, no, thank you, Dr. Barth. And this will be a pretty quick report, and one that will emphasize transition. As the commissioner alluded to, I am in my final 6 months, not that anyone's counting, but no, but at the same time, cognizant and wanting to do right by this transition to NASB, just knowing how much it's meant to me and to the board. So there's 2 different things I wanted to mention here. One, the email that Ms. Hollis was so wonderful in forwarding. Thank you, Ms. Hollis, for doing that. There is some openings, as is done annually, an invitation to all state boards across the country who are members to send representatives to the Government Affairs Committee and to the Policy Positions Committee for NASB. And correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Barth, I know we did not have anyone on the PEP committee last year, and on the Government Affairs, I don't think we did either.
Yeah, I don't think we've, Alice Mahoney did that for 5 or 6 years. She was incredibly loyal, and we have not been able to transition anyone into that. So I'd really encourage. So the Government Affairs is really tracks what NASB work and federal education work in general at Washington. So, you know, Ms. Newton, that might be something because of your work with us. If you're in a spot, that might be a good transition there. And then the PEP is public education positions and kind of NASB's positions on public education positions. So I would really encourage, it's a way to, it's mainly done via phone calls. It does not require travel, but I think they're both very good opportunities to just stay informed with what's going on nationally in public education policy.
And then to lift up the Arkansas perspective as well. So I didn't know if any colleagues had any questions based on that email or some expressed interest, because I do think we have to get in nominations by the end of the year, if that's correct, Dr. Barth. And if not, then I extend an invitation on the margins of this so that we're not breaking any open or closed meeting laws, but if anyone did have any questions and independently wanted to ask about either of these committees, as you all's NASB liaison, I'd welcome the opportunity to put in some Arkansas names for that. And then maybe even, Ms. Hollis, it occurs to me Ms. Dean being ill today might be somebody, if you could be so kind to ask if she had any interest in either position, since I know I can't speak with her directly on the matter, if you could just be so kind and let me know if she has any questions. I know she's somebody that I think would have a lot to offer and maybe even gain through those questions. I know that she looks, especially even through her day work, on education trends in this country. Maybe the PEP committee especially might be of interest to her. And Ms. Noonan, if I know you're only hearing it for the first time, but if you do have some interest on the GAC committee, again, we would just very much welcome the chance to lift up those names. And then the other piece I did want to offer, and I know I alluded to this last time, but technically my time on the board for NASB has expired with the last convening that we had in Atlanta in November. So I would love to see if somebody else on this board would like to be that liaison on NASB issues. And really what that entails is just lifting up anything from the emails and or, you know, expressing an interest, maybe trying to attend some of these meetings. Obviously, it's a more formal process to be on their board the way I was, and that's not what this liaison position entails, but just in general, building that relationship with Ms. Admison and her team, and being able to communicate things on our behalf. Something as, for example, with Dr. Hill, right? Being able to try and find synergies between the interests of the board, so as yours, Dr. Hill, in this of student discipline and leveraging those resources from NASB. I do plan to, and I can stay in this role a little longer if helpful, in that I do and would like to attend the legislative conference in March as my final kind of act with NASB, but would also love to see maybe one of the other, our board members, colleagues join me there as a way of making that introduction to the NASB staff and setting up the liaison for the future, if possible. So I don't know if that's something anyone naturally has interest in, and if not, please count on me to be bugging all of you the next couple months, especially as we get up to that March meeting, because I would love to be able to officially transition the torch in a way that we still have and are able to leverage the full benefits of this resource.
Right. And the NASB Legislative Conference outside in Washington, is March 4th through the 6th, so right before our state board meeting in March. And so I'd urge folks to consider that option as well. Okay. And finally, liaison to special education. Anything additional? Yeah, great. Okay. All right. Any other business to come before us? If not, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right. Motion by Ms. Wright, second by Mr. Black, all in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. I hope everyone has the happiest of holidays. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And good luck with the growth of your family. Yeah.